2-year contract with Mercedes. So that's good news for him. I guess it's good news for the championship as well. It means we have a battle moving forward. Of course, Red Bull and Mercedes were so far ahead of everyone else, and Lando Norris and McLaren are trying their best to prove me wrong this weekend, and they were supremely impressive. Maybe it's you could put that Williams 0.6 of a second behind the Merc. Who would have thought that? Last year or the year before, who would have thought they would be able to bring it back out of the race? So ever since Ocon has received a new contract, he hasn't been performing so well. So a little bit of a worry for change their name to Orange Bull after seeing this, because it's all about Max Verstappen. And also technically Perez deserved his penalties, and the fact he did the same thing twice was shocking. He shouldn't have done that. He should have left the space for Leclerc, but he clearly didn't want to give up the position. Good evening, everyone. You're very welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining us. So, this is the race reaction for the Austrian Grand Prix 2021, and it was quite a race. We probably thought we knew it all following last weekend's display. It was the same race winner in the end, but the race itself was quite different, and it was thoroughly entertaining in my opinion. Even more so than last weekend. I think last weekend I give it a solid 3 out of 5. So let's jump into it. Of course, last weekend, just a very quick recap, we had Verstappen who won, Hamilton was in second, and Bottas was in third. So it's one step away from being the boring trio that we've become very used to at this stage. Of course, the difference there was Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen previously, or maybe Verstappen would break into it. So Verstappen is keeping Hamilton honest at the moment, and Hamilton, of course, is now this weekend celebrating a new two-year contract with Mercedes. So that's good news for him. I guess it's good news for the championship as well. It means we have a battle moving forward. Of course, brand new regulations coming into place next year as well. It'll shake things up a little bit, but just how much, hard to tell. I think all the main development, all the main power still resides with a couple of teams, and so I don't really see the order changing that much. Maybe Renault and Alpine will have something to say about that. Anyhow, let's get into this. So that was last week. Of course, last week is gone, and now we're moving to this week. And this week, firstly, with the qualifying. Qualifying, I would say, was relatively straightforward. Verstappen looked fast for the majority of the weekend again, very similar to last weekend. And of course, he put it on pole position. When it came to Q3, he actually, once again, was his first lap was the faster one. And the second lap just before the end, not really too many drivers, with one exception, one main exception, I would say, managed to qualify at that fast. That main driver, of course, was Lando Norris. Look at that. Lando Norris qualified in second place. In the last race reaction for the Styrian Grand Prix, which is essentially the same race circuit, I had said that I didn't expect that anybody would break into the top two, that Red Bull and Mercedes were so far ahead of everyone else, and Lando Norris and McLaren are trying their best to prove me wrong this weekend, and they were supremely impressive. Maybe it's just the circuit suited them. They had 2 weeks running, they brought a few upgrades, they made some changes, there was different tyres this weekend as well. We moved one step softer. I thought it might actually introduce a few more pit stops, but it wasn't really a factor, and we did have quite good weather for the race as well. But Norris breaking in there, so really well done to him, and he did have a great race today as well, as we will see shortly. Perez was in third. That was very solid qualifying from him. Hamilton disappointing in fourth. Bottas was fifth. Gasly in sixth, and Tsunoda in seventh. So good pace once again from both of the AlphaTauris. 8th place. Look at that. George Russell in 8th place. Now, he didn't qualify in 8th. He qualified in 9th, but Vettel did get a penalty for impeding Bottas, I think it was, during qualifying. A slightly contentious issue, of course, because Bottas was impeded, correct, by Vettel, Vettel in turn was impeded by somebody. I can't remember who. I think it might have been... no, sorry. I have it all completely wrong. So Alonso was impeded by Bottas. You see the difference one day makes. I'm completely forgetting everything already. So yeah, he was impeded by Vettel, and it was actually Bottas that impeded Vettel. And Vettel didn't actually make it around to start his final lap either, so he actually ran out of time. So there was a lot of impeding happening. It was really, there were a lot of cars, a lot of drivers there at the last corner, so it made it very, very difficult. Anyhow, it all turns out that Vettel had a 3-place grid penalty, putting him back in 11th, promoting Russell into 8th, promoting Stroll into 9th. He actually qualified in 10th, and then Sainz, who was in 11th, moves up one position into 10th place. And the good thing for Sainz was, because he didn't actually qualify in the top 10, he had a pick of tyres moving into today's race. Very good for him. And then, yeah, as I said, George Russell, he qualified in P9, of course, moved up to P8 because of the penalty that Vettel had. Fantastic qualifying result for him. You can see there's their first Q3 qualifying since Italy 2018. I actually thought it was longer than that, but it's the first time that George Russell has broken into Q3, so they're definitely going in the right direction there. I'll come back to that in a second, because of course we have to highlight the fact that this is 3 podiums in a row now, or 3 pole positions. They did all work themselves into podiums in a sense. So 3 pole positions in a row for Red Bull, specifically for Max Verstappen, France, Styria and Austria. Of course, Styria and Austria is the same circuit, so there are certain synergies that come into play there. And then the reason I wanted to show this, so if we take ourselves all the way down to number 9, where we have George Russell. So of course, as I said, he originally qualified in 9 before the penalty that was applied. You can see, where are we? It was 0.8 of a second, just over 8. So basically 0.9 of a second, 0.871. The difference between the Williams and the number 1 car, which isn't even the Merc anymore, it's staggering. 9/10 of a second. What a great improvement from Williams over the last 2 years. That is a really, really good improvement. I know there's a large element of the driver being involved here as well, because Russell seems like a really, really fast driver, and maybe we should actually be comparing with Latifi. We can't actually do that because we don't have the ability on this timing screen. But 0.9 of a second. That's incredible. And actually, look at Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton was 0.3 of a second behind Max Verstappen. So actually, you could put that Williams 0.6 of a second behind the Merc. Who would have thought that? Last year or the year before, who would have thought they would be able to bring it back that much? So that's a fantastic performance for them. And then we get into today's race, and for a little while I actually thought we were going to have the exact same result all over again. Probably wouldn't need to change my my top 3 lineup here, but you can see it did change. So Verstappen won again. Okay, that part we've got. Bottas came in second. He was allowed to race with Hamilton and overtook him. Hamilton, of course, had issues. And Norris came in third. And Norris had a 5-second pit penalty as well for a maneuver with Perez. We'll get onto that in a little while. So that's really good going. And then as we move it on and looking at the full race result that we have here. So Verstappen first, Bottas second, Norris third. Hamilton did finish in 4th after all of that. Sainz finished in 5th. A great result for Sainz, made his way from starting in 10th to 5th. I think he had only 1 pit stop as well, so he went long on the hard tires at the start of the race, and he was able to change to mediums, if I saw correctly or remember correctly. So it was mediums I think he had. Perez was in 6th, and Perez was muck today. He was really bad today. I'll talk about it a little bit more shortly, but not impressed with Perez today. It seems like Bottas and Perez kind of alternate the weekends that they're going to have bad races, and so this was definitely the Perez weekend, whereas Bottas, He was good. He was impressive. I can't complain about Bottas's position. Okay, so that was Perez in 6th, Ricciardo in 7th. Ricciardo, yeah, that was a good result for Ricciardo considering where he qualified as well. So he did well to make his way into the points. He had quite an entertaining race. So that whole battle there, let's say between 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, yeah, all the way to 9th. Alonso wasn't really in that battle. It was really, really entertaining, and it really added to the race, I have to say. So that's Ricciardo in 7th. We have Leclerc in 8th. He'll be disappointed to lose out to his teammate, definitely. He looked very racy today as well. Did get run off the track twice by Perez. And in 9th we have Gasly, who confusingly is car number 10, so that's why I had to stop there for a second just to read through that one and make sure I wasn't confusing myself. And then in 10th we have Alonso, who didn't finish in 14th, of course, going with the common trend from the last one. So Alonso in 10th, and he beats George Russell, who was in 11th. Oh, I felt so bad for George Russell. He was there or thereabouts. You could feel last weekend was probably the weekend that it was working a little better for him. He battled as much as he could with Alonso, but unfortunately it just wasn't enough. So I was disappointed for him there based on that. So Alonso gets the point. Alonso's teammate Esteban Ocon gets 0 points. He finished last. He actually went out on the first, I don't know if it was the first corner or second corner, touch with, it looked like one of the Haas cars touched his front right tire and the suspension broke, and that was it. Very, very simple. It looked like a relatively innocuous touch, but it was enough to cause the damage that put him out of the race. So ever since Ocon has received a new contract, he hasn't been performing so well, so a little bit of a worry for Renault, or whatever they're called these days, Alpine. Max Verstappen, he did the clean sweep, the Grand Slam this weekend. Look at that, pole position. He led every lap of the race. He had the fastest lap, and he had victory, of course, the most important part. But fastest lap, it was interesting. Last weekend he didn't get that, but he made sure that he got it this weekend. So that was really good. Actually, tyre issues as well for Max Verstappen. It sounds like he had a rip in, was it the rear right tyre? And he had to make a pit stop before the end of the race with probably about 10 laps to go to change tyres. It worked really well for him. It actually facilitated him getting the fastest lap as well, but he had such a dominant lead in the race that there was absolutely no issue for him there, so he was able to do that without any problems. He didn't drop the lead once, as we can see here. And next up, driver of the day was Lando Norris. Norris was great, very entertaining. Put up the battle to the Mercs as well. I think I'm going to talk about that shortly as well. What else do I have here? So the driver standings after round 9. So after the Austrian Grand Prix, 9 rounds gone already. Can you believe it? It's been a different year, definitely, with Verstappen on the top. So Verstappen has a 32-point lead over Hamilton now. That is insane. So it means even if Verstappen doesn't complete the next race and Hamilton wins, he's still leading against Hamilton. Hamilton won't be happy with that. He'll be as sick as a dog about that one. So that is not good for Hamilton. Yeah, Mercedes will be bringing their package to the next race, where they're bringing their upgrades. Of course, this is the same Mercedes team that Hamilton told us were finished with upgrades for the year and we're concentrating on 2022. As I said, I'll believe it when I see it, and I haven't seen it yet, so I just don't believe it. Perez is in 3rd, just about hanging on there. Look at that. Norris has closed in on him, 3 points in it. It's really not acceptable for the second Red Bull driver to be only 3 points ahead of a McLaren, in my opinion. Controversial maybe, but that's the way it is. The McLaren is not as good as those two, the Mercs or the Red Bulls. So that's really impressive from Norris. He's been so consistent this season. He's a great driver. Can you imagine him in one of the top teams? I wouldn't have believed it previously, because himself and Sainz were nip and tuck, so Sainz must also be a really, really good driver. But look at that. Anyway, I'll stop gushing on about that. So Bottas then is in 5th place in the championship. Also really not good enough from Bottas, and to be nearly 60 points behind his teammate at this stage, he just doesn't look like he's going to challenge Hamilton at all this season. He kind of looks a little bit downbeat. I think he's given up more or less on this. So that's a difficult one for him. We have then Leclerc and Sainz still kind of involved in that McLaren sandwich to an extent. Only 2 points between those two drivers as well. Very, very tight between them. So very consistent from both of the drivers in terms of their results. And then we have Ricciardo, who did well this weekend again on 40 points. And as well as he did do this weekend, he's still losing ground to his teammate who outshone him. I'm going to come to that in a minute. We have Gasly on 39 points and Vettel hanging in there in 10th place. Look at that. He didn't pick up any points today, unfortunately. And 5 in a row for Red Bull. Perez is kind of like the joker in there. 4 wins for Verstappen and 1 win for Perez. 5 wins in a row for Red Bull. Unbelievable. Great going. When do we reach the point where it gets boring? You know, we complain so much about Mercedes. Now we're going to start complaining about Red Bull. And I have worried for years that if Verstappen ever finds himself in the best car, it's just going to be another whitewash for years and years and years. And he's so young. We need to be careful what we wish for sometimes. Ominous. Constructors standings after round 9. Red Bull leading the way on 286 points, so that is 44 points ahead of Mercedes and 242. And we have McLaren then in 3rd place with 141 points, and Ferrari on 122 points. So the battle there between McLaren and Ferrari is as hot as ever. I'll get to that again in a second. I feel like I'm putting off everything today in this race reaction. AlphaTauri are in 5th, Aston Martin are in 6th, Alpine 7th, and Alfa Romeo, the last point scoring team, in 8th, 2 points. Williams and Haas have yet to score a point, and George Russell was so close today to getting a point. Let's come back to this battle between Ricciardo and Norris and just figure it out. You know, what's happening to Ricciardo? Has he lost his touch, etc., etc.? I'm not convinced he has lost his touch, to be honest. So 7 points maybe is what I'm trying to say. No, he can. Look at this. Too many numbers on the screen and I've confused myself. This is why I never went into accountancy or anything like that. 7th place for Daniel Ricciardo today. Of course, he got no points last weekend. It was a good performance from him today. But the issue here, of course, is his qualifying was not so good. So he could have set himself up a lot better for the race if the qualifying wasn't so bad. We saw Norris was able to battle with the Mercs. And of course, he beat Perez and the other Red Bull as well. So Ricciardo probably will feel disappointed about that. Also, he was beaten by both Ferraris. So that's he is being beaten by both Ferraris, so that's not pleasant either in their battle for 3rd place. And speaking of that battle for 3rd place, here we go. We have them both in here. So we have, of course, McLaren on 141 points and Ferrari now on 122 points. McLaren gained 7 more points again today, whereas last weekend it was Ferrari who had a gain of 4 points. Look at that, very consistent from Ferrari, 14 points for both of the last 2 races. So yeah, very similar finishing positions, and that's what they're at. So let's talk about a few other key points from this race. I just had to show this. Look at this. This really is the orange takeover. As I said, this is the orange team. Red Bull, they should change their name to Orange Bull after seeing this, because it's all about Max Verstappen And all the Orange fans, majority Dutch I guess, were very happy to cheer on Lando Norris as well, who's also sporting the orange car. So a nice coincidence to happen there. So it really was, in every manner of the meaning, it was an orange takeover. Max Verstappen winning, and of course Lando Norris performing so well. It's a shame he didn't get second place actually, to really cap off this quite loose analogy that I have going on here, but you get what I'm saying. So let me have a look at my notes and figure out what I need to talk about. So yes, dominant display from Max Verstappen. There isn't too much we can talk about on this topic. As we stated already, he did lead the race for the majority. He was completely on top. Never lost the lead at any point whatsoever. Pit stop strategy was quite easy for them because he already had a good gap to Hamilton, courtesy of the battle Hamilton had with Norris. So they just really had to match the Mercedes pit stop strategy and make sure they don't screw up the pit stops, which they didn't for Max. They semi-screwed up one of the tires for Perez, so he had a 3.1 second stop as opposed to a 2.2, 2.5 second stop, which will be the norm for Red Bull. So God forbid he almost lost a second on his pit stop, so that's a real screw up. Probably not. Next thing up, Super Norris. Yes, Super Norris. Norris was fantastic in this race. He was fantastic all weekend, and I really thought he might actually just nick pole position yesterday, and he just missed out by a couple of thousandths of a second. So really unfortunate for him. But you know, once again, he goes to impress everyone and show us what he's capable of. A great result for him. And he looks like a very exciting driver. We didn't really see that over the last couple of seasons, and as I said earlier, I think it was semi-diluted by the fact that Sainz was also performing just as well as Norris. So Sainz is also a strong driver, is my takeaway point from this. Ricciardo, yeah, we can't flog this point anymore. He needs to come back into the championship. He needs to come back into the reckoning here and get to grips with this McLaren, because it has great speed, especially in a straight line as we saw today. So Norris thoroughly deserved driver of the day. Perez and all his penalties. My goodness, what was Perez up to today? So he got pushed off the track by Norris. Norris got a 5-second penalty. Yeah, I think some people said this was harsh. Now, certainly, I was watching on Sky Sports, so there's definitely a very British bias going on there. They're all for Hamilton. They're all for Norris. I don't mind them. I'll use the word gushing again, gushing over Norris so much because he actually has a bit of personality and he's a bit of fun to listen to in interviews and all the rest. But he didn't leave the space. It was technically a penalty, I think. He didn't leave the cars with at that stage of the race so early on with heavy fuel tanks and everything. It's so easy to run wide, but he should have known that Perez was there. He didn't leave the space. He closed the door. He did push him off the track. I don't think Perez was ahead of Norris though. That's the only mitigating factor I will give here in the whole situation where Norris got the penalty. By comparison, when you have Perez then, who ran Leclerc off the track twice in succession and received 2 penalties for that, Leclerc was actually slightly ahead on both occasions from what I could see of the replays. So it was a slam dunk penalty. So Perez... Perez, of course, I was going to say almost gained from the penalty from Norris. Of course, he didn't know. He was run off track and he fell backwards, and it was his race pretty much ruined. Verstappen was very lucky. He didn't need Perez in this race to be his rear gunner, so that did work out well for him. In a sense, Norris was actually his rear gunner, so by Norris getting that 5-second penalty, it worked against Verstappen slightly because he came out behind Bottas after he took his pit stop. But there you go. It's funny the way these things work out. So technically Perez deserved his penalties, and the fact he did the same thing twice was shocking. He shouldn't have done that. He should have left the space for Leclerc, but he clearly didn't want to give up the position. And then, speaking of making the same mistake twice, we have Tsunoda. Tsunoda received 2 penalties. Now, somebody maybe can clarify this for me in the comments, because I wasn't sure about this. So it sounds to me like Tsunoda crossed the pit line on the exit from his first pit stop, and then crossed the pit line on the entry to his second pit stop, and he accordingly received a penalty for both of those. So once again, it's the rules, you know, it is a penalty, he went against it. So Red Bull management probably have a little bit of talking to do with their team later on today, because it's one thing to get penalised once, but to get penalised twice for the same thing for both Perez and Tsunoda, yeah, really not ideal at all. What else happened? Is there anything else? Verstappen dominance, mentioned that. He took 2 pit stops, he was still ahead. We don't need to go over that again. Ricciardo and his bounce back. It was somewhat of a bounce back from Ricciardo. The Ferrari race pace, once again, Ferrari race pace was so much better than their qualifying pace. Actually very like Ricciardo. Ricciardo's race pace was much better than his qualifying pace as well, but we know definitely in the case of the McLaren it does have the pace, as Norris has showed us, so Ricciardo needs to up his game for qualifying. But Ferrari consistently don't seem to be there in the top 10, at least this weekend, for their qualifying pace, but much better in the race. And as I said, Sainz really did a good job, and actually showed that the strategy he went with, starting on the hard tyres, pitting late on in the race, was the superior strategy, because of course he finished ahead of his teammate. So that was a really easy reference point to go to for us. And then finally on my list of things that I want to react to from today's race was Raikkonen. Raikkonen in the last lap, well, second last lap I guess, because they were lapped, Raikkonen and Vettel. So Raikkonen had an incident where he touched tyres with, it was with George Russell, and it wasn't touching tyres actually, so his front wing touched George Russell's tyre, and it made me realise that there have been a couple of incidents this season where Kimi has done something like this and has caused punctures, or his rear wing went flying off. I think it was at Portugal, if I remember correctly. Portimao Grand Prix in Portugal. So this has happened a couple of times. And what's happening here? Is it just that Raikkonen is not paying attention? Is he starting just to lose a little bit of his skill and his judgment? I don't know. I don't know. He's not that old. He's not that much older than me, to be honest. So I don't like to think about losing your wits at this point in life. But maybe when it comes to the cutting edge of Formula 1 drivers, there is something there lacking or diminishing at least. Which leads me on to my point then. It looks like he had no idea that Vettel was there at all when Vettel overtook him. Raikkonen was probably more concerned about George Russell ahead of him and just wasn't paying attention. Plus we were coming towards the end of the race and just drove into Vettel. Luckily he didn't stop Vettel from gaining points, because they were outside of the points at the time. But once again a really negligent move from Raikkonen to take Vettel out of the race there. It caused a number of yellow flags as well to be waved, quite rightly, because we had 2 cars in the gravel. And last I heard, there are 8 drivers, I think, being investigated. I don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. I'll probably put it in the comments later on when I find out what happens with that. That all in all brings it to a close. So those are the main points I wanted to react about during this video with regards to the Austrian Grand Prix. So as I stated earlier on, it was a very interesting race. I really enjoyed the race today. It wasn't so much about the pit strategies today, so it wasn't that kind of strategic race. There was a lot of racing on the track, in particular in the midfield point scoring positions. The Ferraris, Ricciardo, we had Gasly in there as well. It was really entertaining. Of course, Perez was in the mix, so I really liked that. It was fascinating as well to see what happened with Mercedes when Hamilton had the issue for running over the curb and damaged his car, and were they going to tell Bottas to hold off? And they considered it, and eventually they let Bottas go. And of course, Norris got past Hamilton as well. A big shout out for Lewis Hamilton as well, where he came on the radio to complain that his tyres were gone and proceeded to set the fastest lap of the race immediately following that. Classic Lewis, classic Lewis. Please don't change Lewis. I love your messages about the tires. It means you're about to do something amazing or win the race or something like that. It's his catchphrase at this point in time. Anything else to cover? No, that's it. So for me, it's a solid 4 out of 5 this race. So last week was a 3 out of 5. This week it's a 4 out of 5. British Grand Prix coming next in 2 weeks, and we have the sprint race. Yeah, we have to get our arms around a sprint race. Really looking forward to seeing how that goes. I think the qualifying strategy actually that we have at the moment is really quite good. Controversial, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'll do a video about it, I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments. But anyway, that's all to come in 2 weeks. Really looking forward to that. Hoping for another 4 out of 5 race, or a 5 out of 5 would be fantastic as well. You don't see too many of those, but here's hoping. So thank you very much for joining this video. Almost completely forgot to give the shout out here for please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to get notified about new videos as well. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us, and I will talk to you soon.